Hi YouTube, I'm Taylor Berglund, and today I just got my absentee voter ballot in North Carolina. I just moved here to start grad school, and tomorrow night is the very first presidential debate. I'm excited to watch it, I'm excited to see what happens, until I think about the two candidates that I'm going to be watching in the debate. While I love politics, or used to love politics, it's been hard to get enthusiastic about many candidates these days. However, as I was bored and sitting here thinking to myself tonight, I had a thought. Maybe I could fix everything. So we're going to do that tonight. Look, no one is excited about this election. Democrats are mad because 80% of them didn't get their preferred candidate. Republicans are mad because Democrats accidentally picked the most electable candidate. And Mike Pence is mad because the smart money was really on him being a real president by now, one way or another. And of course, we're all mad because we have to think about politics every day. That's what living in a world with Twitter is like. But what if it didn't have to be this way? What if we had a different system? And no, I'm not talking about like socialism or anything like that. I'm talking about judgmental judgedom. We should have judges. Back when Israel was going through its rebellious teenage years, God implemented a series of judges who fought back marauders, liberated the people, and restored Judeo-Christian values. Almost sounds like a campaign ad there. Now, many of these judges were good at their job, and some of them were Abimelech. Look, we always talk about needing a change in Washington, and what's a bigger change than electing a Middle Eastern Jew from over 1,000 years ago? But the way this country's going, we're about 2 years from the purge, so we really have to get this shot right. We're only gonna get one shot on this one. We have to not just think about principles, but about demographics, about winning. So which biblical judge would be the most electable? I'm glad you asked. Nancy Letourneau from Washington Monthly points to 4 factors that determine electability: name recognition, audience bias, feedback loops from polling, and the all-important question, are they a winner? Let's talk through the candidates, who I've divided, Nate Silver style, into tiers. Tier 1 is our top candidates, the perceived front-runners, your Bidens, your Clintons, your Sanders. In this group, we've got Ehud, Othniel, Deborah, and Samuel. We're going to talk through each of these candidates' pros and cons, but obviously, elections are not won in pros and cons and in spreadsheets. Otherwise, the 2020 would be a matchup between Jeb Bush and incumbent Hillary Clinton, which is not the world we live in. So what I did is I polled voters. And when I say I polled voters, I polled one voter, my friend Dietrich.
I've watched West Wing a few times, so I'm kind of an expert on the presidential factor.
Okay. When I first posed the question, which biblical judge would make the best presidential candidate, where did your mind immediately go?
Terror.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to the candidates, intercut that as well with, what people on the street are saying about the candidates, what the Dietrichs of the world have to say. And I think by the end of it, we'll know which biblical candidate we can insert as a valid third-party contender into the midst of this heated election. So let's dive into Tier 1. Let's kick things off by talking about my boy, Ehud. That'll work. Ehud here is a James Bond spy assassin dude because judges rules. Ehud killed the Moabite king Eglon at a diplomatic summit and got away with it. He then led Israelite into war over 10,000 Moabites. That's a lot of wartime experience. He's a bit of a hero. And then after that, the land had peace for 80 years, which is near the highest end of any of the judges. Look, there was a lot of peace and prosperity under his reign, and he's pretty cool. So I think he's a top candidate.
I like a man that isn't afraid to get his hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the underhandedness could be a factor as far as how visuals play out, but he is a winner. So he has that going for him.
Oh my gosh, this takes forever. Hang on. This is a bad idea. It's going to be a virtual board now. Now we're talking about Othniel. Now you might say, who's Othniel? Great question. He's a nephew of a war hero. Little guy, you might know him, named Caleb. He overpowered King Cushan Rishathaim, yep, nailed it, of Aram, and he ruled in peace for 40 years after that. He's also one of only 4 judges that it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon. So if we're looking for a particularly pious individual, I think Othniel's got us covered.
I don't think he's strong enough to go the distance in his own capacity. But if he jumps on someone else's ticket, I think it makes for a very persuasive case.
This is a year when a lot of people would like a guy named Barak to be in the race, but he's not going to do it. So Deborah's going to be in our race instead. Deborah is the only woman in this field.
What is your impression of Deborah?
Strong. You know, she does give off the impression of strength.
People sought her to settle disputes, so she was a well-regarded, well-liked leader. And she led the land in peace for 40 years. There's a lot of pros about Deborah. Now, there are a couple of cons that exist. For one, she didn't lead the army by herself or kill Sisera herself.
Yael is not considered a judge,
right?
But she should be.
Okay.
She gets all the work done. So I actually think that Yael undercuts Deborah's race. Interesting that they pit the 2 women against each other in the race.
Likewise, 6 of the tribes of Israel showed up for the battle that she was leading, but 4 didn't, which might point to her being a bit of a divisive candidate. Rounding out Tier 1, we have Samuel. Now, here's some great things about Samuel. Samuel directly speaks to God and hears his commands. So that's just like, boy, I want that in a president. And he went on a circuit judging Israel in many different locations, as scripture tells us, so he's well-traveled as a candidate on the campaign route. Now, his sons are gonna be a liability.
What is your impression of Samuel?
I love Samuel. Just the proven track record, right? Like, he definitely gets things done. I also think he doesn't have the electability that some of the others might have because he can be kind of a hard nose, kind of hard to work with, not willing to compromise, not willing to come to the table. And we
he's an ideologue.
He's an ideologue.
Is Samuel a winner?
No, he's not.
Yeah.
He's right. But I think the price he pays for being right all the time is taking those L's.
Now, that brings us to Tier 2, best summed up by Kristen Chenoweth. Think of celebrated heads of state or especially great communicators. Did they have brains or knowledge? Don't make me laugh. They're popular. Sometimes, that's all that matters in America. Gideon is an interesting one to break down. There's a lot of pros, cons on either side, but there's no denying Gideon is near the top when it comes to name recognition.
Honestly, you don't get a real judge in the Book of Judges until you hit Gideon. And then you're almost done with the book. So Gideon's really the only one I'd vote for.
Now, he does have a bit of a weak family background. He's indecisive and changes his positions frequently and seems a little bit wishy-washy if you think about it.
You know, I think there is kind of a strike against Gideon in that department. Youngest son, kind of wishy-washy, doesn't really know what he's going to get into, doesn't really want to be there. He doesn't have a winning attitude, for sure. But do facts matter in an election would be the other question. Like, does the fact that he actually wins
Getting so postmodern now.
As far as the perception of winning?
He defeats the Midianite forces with just 300 men, killed 2 leaders, killed 135,000 men, captured and killed Zeba and Zalmunna, who were the kings of Midian, in a second battle. Strong vengeful streak, if you didn't pick that up from the warrior thing, that comes out when he beats the men of Sukkoth and kills citizens of a city just because they didn't help him out. He also created a false idol, which all of Israel worshipped. But there was peace for 40 years.
So I think some of the things that I see in his platform that I'm really not seeing in a lot of the other judges' platforms is a massive decrease in military spending. Just cutting the military's budget is probably going to be his top priority. If we only have 300 people defending the United States and it works, I'm cool with that. as long as it works.
We cut the military 90%.
300. Yeah, like I'm gonna ask for a drastic scale back, like by at least 95%. That would be incredible.
And it will be based on arbitrary things that have nothing to do with the military strength.
To be in the military.
Android versus iOS. Everyone who's iOS, you're out of the military now.
Name recognition through the roof. His decision making, though, is questionable. Speaking of questionable decision making, let's talk about everyone's favorite strong boy, Samson. He's a war hero. He struck down 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone and then killed more when he died than when he lived, which is wild. He led Israel for 20 years in sort of an on-again, off-again capacity. He's one of the 5 mentioned in Hebrews, and is one of the 4 that the Spirit of the Lord came upon. That's all good. Also, bad things is animal cruelty, because he ripped a lion up just apart in the... maybe the direction you would least want to be ripped apart into. He's easily manipulated, as we can see through everything that happens with Delilah. He killed 30 men just to settle a wedding bet, and then his wife left him or was given to someone else. It's a little unclear.
I don't think he has the presidential factor. Nobody wants to elect a long-haired lacrosse stick carrying brony, you know? That's not the look. Not to mention, he's definitely going to get caught in a sex scandal, like months in office. So, image tarnished, doesn't have the look to be president.
There are folders of opposition research on Samson.
Yeah, not only he gave them the opposition, he gave them the files. He walked up and said, "Here are all the files of all the women in your cabinet that I slept with."
And then he lit their house on fire, because that's how Samson rolls.
And then they all died.
Tier 3 is the people who are very well qualified and also very boring. Think Amy Klobuchar. Tier 3 is where Tola lives. Who's Tola? Well, he saved Israel from someone. It doesn't say in Judges. It's unclear. But
Tola is the definition of safety vote. Stick with Tola, things will be all right. Leave Tola, things all go to hell.
what about our boy Jair? Jair led Israel for 22 years, and there's no indication the land was ever in danger when he was in charge, which I guess is good.
Jair doesn't have the name recognition that Tola does. And honestly, if he wants to get far, he might have to sit in the VP spot for a while and then try again in, next 8 years or so.
Now, when we get to tier 4, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. The guys that make you go, who? Ibzan has 30 sons and daughters, so he is prolific and maybe a ladies' man. Unclear. He did lead Israel for 7 years in peace, during which there were no wars, so that's good.
Do you have any thoughts on Ibzan?
Ibzan?
Do you know who Ibzan is?
Looking over my notes. No,
Okay.
You got me.
Elon led Israel for 10 years in peacetime. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Do you know who Elon is?
No.
Abdon led Israel for 8 years in peacetime. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys, which is apparently notable. I don't know. That's what Judges says. Look, it says that. I don't know why that's the detail they included.
Do you know who Abdon is?
I don't know who Abdon is.
Shamgar is one of the early judges in the book. He struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad and saved Israel. So that's like shades of Samson.
Shamgar coming in as really strengthens this ticket because of his reputation of being really hard-nosed when negotiating with terrorists.
Where do I even start with Jephthah? Okay, so Jephthah is a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead and his mother was a prostitute. So already, this is going to be a wild story. He was driven from his home, so he led a gang of scoundrels, which if you think about it, he'll do great in DC. He tries to solve a dispute with the king of the Ammonites diplomatically at first, and then that doesn't really work, but he does win in the fight, but also he makes a rash vows and killed his daughter.
He really keeps his promises. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. He has a track record to prove it.
Yeah.
And when he overpromises, he over-delivers.
Yeah.
So there's really a lot to be said about him as a candidate. I think the thing that stands out to me as kind of maybe something that he could work on, not much of a family man,
No.
willing to work across the aisle in ways that I don't see in a lot of these other candidates. Like when he makes promises, he doesn't do it in the Judeo-Christian tradition. He does it very much so in the pagan tradition. And that like willingness to, bring in other traditions and incorporate them under one house, very political. He did that for political gain. It worked. You might not like the results, but that's peak performance, my friend.
Weirdly, he's also one of the 4 that the Spirit of the Lord came upon and is mentioned in Hebrews. I don't know why Jephthah made the cut, but he's there. Okay, guys, I need to talk about Abimelech. Abimelech got the job via nepotism, not divine favor.
Like a John Kennedy type situation.
Exactly.
The nation, under his leadership, fell into idolatry to the Baals, which, if you know the Old Testament, God and the Baals are not on good terms. They're on the opposite of whatever that would be. He hired a pack of mercenaries as his followers, and then went on to kill 70 out of 71 of his brothers, which I view as a failing in 2 regards. The obvious moral failing, but also the logistical failing of at what point, once you've killed 70 of your brothers, feels like a weird time to hold back, right? He lights a tower containing 1,000 citizens on fire so that they all die. That's the headline. And then he dies like an idiot because someone pushes a rock out of a window and it falls on his head like a cartoon anvil and he dies. He did all of this in 3 years that he was leading. That is a practically Trumpian pace of chaos. Abimelech is clearly the one person that should never, ever be considered.
I'm pro Abimelech running. I think he could be a really strong political force in today's climate. He's savvy. He's ruthless. He's cutthroat. And it's that kind of attitude that makes him a winner. If you're looking at this from like a necessary evil perspective, Abimelech is your guy. I think he's well suited to a political life.
So after the focus group, I ran the numbers based on the polling data, based on electability, based on everything that we're looking at in the formula. And after calculating everything together, I have found that the most electable person in the batch is Abimelech. Are you kidding me? I think I'm fine with Biden and Trump.